there's a waist strap for a reason.
Yeah.
No, that's absolutely right.
And it's a big thing in the infantry, and I never got it from you, but wait, take that weight strap off. Yeah, that's for weakness. Like, no, that's the way it's supposed to be worn.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or the logic was, if you take contact, you need to be able to shed your backpack. If you take contact, you're not going to give a fuck. You're going to be so high on adrenaline that you could be carrying.
That thing's just going to vanish.
Yeah.
I mean, you threw it 100 yards. You didn't even know you could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it takes 1 second to unclip it.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Right, it's going to be okay. But yeah, that was certainly the culture when I came in as a private, like in foot marching with, I think it was third brigade, 101st. I mean, it was like you literally, the way that they had it, it was like literally, put behind the Alice pack and taped up. Like it wasn't even, it was not even an option to like have that thing out. So it's a mistake,
So that's how a lot of people get hurt.
Yeah.
You don't use the equipment in the way that it's designed to be used.
Yeah.
And I mean, you have a good point. I mean, rucking breaks a lot of people.
That's right.
Some people that have muscular skeletal issues that they didn't even know about.
Yeah.
Put 40 pounds on the back, make them walk 12 miles. You'll figure out that they got a problem.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
That's right.
So we're here with episode 2 after our in-depth discussion about ruck marching and warrant officers. And we're here again with Lieutenant Colonel Brian Kitching. He's joining us for part 2. And we appreciate everyone else joining us for part 2 and hearing the rest of his story. And Brian, what we kind of wanted to lead on into was we mentioned a little bit in the first episode that, firefights were a big part of our deployment, but really the undercurrent for the whole thing was the IED. And which we perceived to be a unique aspect of RAO that I know we shared with Helmand, Zari, Argandab, was the very small dismounted IEDs.
Yeah.
What was your intelligence beforehand and understanding of how that particular fight was going to pan out, and how did it pan out?
So some of the intel that we had was, if you remember, and I can't remember when we were at NTC whether Colonel Rutherford brought this. It was like this PowerPoint presentation, which I had seen before, but essentially it was showing. It's one of these PowerPoints that shows some of the ways that they are putting, that they will sort of set these things up, whether it's, as you're walking along a path, like an IED under a tree, that's a nice place to sit, or in a wall, and they would show these pictures of, the IED's up underneath this piece of dirt. Can you tell that it's there? And, and as I know, you guys know way better than I do. In most cases, you can't, you can't identify where it is. You do get a better sense in some cases, how, just
where
based where
it
it should be, or we've been here before, and this looks like a great area to stage an attack, or to set something up. But we know that the equipment was pretty bad in terms of detecting that stuff. So I knew that the IED was sort of the centerpiece of their ability to kind of, get started with a complex attack, if they could. And if they couldn't, then there was certainly the geometry of, our little piece of Panjwai was such that, you could kind of watch our formation walking around and kind of get into a position where you could at least, either do some small scale like skirmishing or sort of just baseline ambush with, PKM, AK-47, and then kind of break contact and move into, those sort of more dense clusters of structure. So, I had that intel from Colonel Rutherford. I had, my own, experience of contact inside that area. And then, discussions with my brother and his ODA and then others who had served in that same area, like Zari, Argandab, et cetera. Yeah.
So when you were in Panjwai before, was the IED threat as prevalent? Because was it before 2006 that you were running around in there?
No, it was after. Yeah, it was after that. But again, it was not as much of a, concern, I guess, because, we weren't out there. Like, you wouldn't typically go in somewhere and then walk for 3 hours. It was more like you're going to land and then maybe run into a compound.
Yeah.
So, we know here that like it could be anywhere.
Yeah.
But in a lot of cases, like there's a picture, I think on the podcast, I was like, you mentioned if you get into a village and like people are milling about, you got kids running around, you're like, oh, okay, well, we're probably going to be okay. But if you go into a village, doesn't matter how far you are into the village, if there's not a whole lot of people walking around, like an IED could be anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think we were in some cases running around doing these raids, and we probably dodged a bullet, so to speak, because we did have Ranger elements who, had some pretty catastrophic IED events in
just
those
after we
areas.
left,
That's right. So
yeah, that was a bad one.
yeah. So but it's a different beast when you're out there in the day.
And we got a taste of that on that air assault that we did out to the west. Actually, we hit the same compound that we took contact from that very first firefight.
I remember that.
It was like months later.
I remember that.
But we got a taste for that, and I remember we were always joking, fucking Rangers, they're all badass and stuff, but they've had to come here and hump their gear.
That's right. That's exactly right. And the amount of support and assets that go into putting, a Ranger element onto the ground in the middle of the night, it's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot. And so, for us, it's like, during the deployment we're discussing in 2012, it's like, you make contact and then you call it for support, and they're like, I mean, how bad is it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you taking
really need
taking a lot of contact,
Yeah.
or just a little bit.
Yeah. And that's a good point. And I was joking. I don't think I broke a sweat on that air assault. But
that was a glorious mission.
That was
so much
the
fun.
way to do it. It
When
was
we
like,
found
man.
that we didn't have to walk back.
Yeah.
Coming back.
We were like, yeah.
But I mean, you think like how difficult that typically, like, to get those resources.
Get that pulled down.
I was amazed it happened.
Yeah.
I can't believe we did as many as we did.
Yeah.
And we got 3 or 4 good air assaults in there.
Yeah.
I mean, while we're talking about it, I mean, can you shed a little insight on that air assault, how that ended up coming to be?
I actually don't remember the origin of it. But I think what made it a little bit easier for us to get several of those is because we sort of had an understanding on how to use the assets, how to plan it, how to, speak, I had to know how to communicate with pilots to say, hey, this is going to be, this is the kind of operation it'll be. It's going to be, very, I don't want to, simple, but it's not like we're going to fly for 2 hours to a location. You're going to have to, like, all the complexity of logistics, like refuel and doing, it's like, it was a pretty short flight.
It was.
It was very short. It's very short. And so I think, having habitual relationships with, with flight crews and aviation, I think that made it easier for us to be able to put those together throughout the deployment.
Yeah. We had some, we got to do a couple, 3 good air assaults, but the vast majority of the time we walked in, which you had to walk in Panjwai, which we've already talked about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, going back to the IEDs, you mentioned the equipment.
Yeah.
And I know our perception was that we never received the training on the equipment that we should have before we went in there.
Yeah.
And part of that is because it was such a short notice deployment. When were we going to send guys off to get a 40-hour course on the Minehound?
Sure.
It wasn't a possibility, but you understood the IED threat going in. Did the fact that we weren't getting training on that equipment and the TTPs, was that a concern?
Yeah. So I think what I'd say there's, like, when we got to Kandahar, I can't remember who specifically was identified, but there was training that happened there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the way that at least the leadership looked at it is when, so there's that training there as much as they could offer, which was
worthless,
right? Because they're essentially setting up a lane that is not, what you will face.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And
You know,
It
it's
was
not
like tripwires and
Sure,
like
sure.
and Soviet tank
Sure.
mines.
And not even
stuff
that,
like
it was just like a patch of dirt. You
Sure.
know, if they had created funnels
Right,
and you
right.
know things like that, have been different.
Right,
But it's just like a little
right.
field, and you know.
And so the way I think at least Colonel Rutherford saw it when I talked to him about this exact thing was when, trying to set up your own and continuing to go back through those. And yeah, I think when we all look back on it is like, I'm not sure how much training would be required for a piece of equipment that doesn't really work that well.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe there is, but the other thing to remember is like, at what pace do you have to walk in order for it to actually be effective? I mean, you guys were probably the best in terms of, and of course the other platoons would be like, that's not true. But
they're allowed to be wrong.
Yeah. But I mean, in some cases, like just a sort of sweep, sort of just
putting on the dog as my
we were just carrying it.
Yeah.
but I've seen it, like I've seen a number of different ways that guys who are walking up front will do it, and with not just Minehound, but of course the other variants. And
I mean, the trick was really, by the end, it wasn't that we were not using it. It was that
we knew
where we could be relatively safe, and we knew we had to turn it on.
Yeah,
and that's what it boiled down to. Is like, we talked in the previous episode about, as first platoon, we kind of had those three phases, those three evolutions of the fight. And by the time we got to that third round, our counter IED senses were very, very finely tuned.
Yeah.
And so those last few patrols, it was like we were in the grape rows. We weren't.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
We were hauling ass
to
get to the objective. And now, when we would get to a path we had to cross, we wouldn't, instead of just walking across the intersection or going through a T intersection or a bridge, knock down the wall.
Yeah.
Very deliberately clear across that path. Hopefully there's a shit creek on the other side, because for folks who don't know how IEDs work, if they get wet, they ain't going to work.
Yeah.
So, slide in that shit creek up and over the next wall and then back into a field. And then you don't have to, then you could just bolt down the, the grape row again. So it was a constant, the thing about, at least on our level, the constant fight with the IED element was an incredibly difficult one, because the lessons that you had to learn were very harshly learned.
Yeah.
And then you had to took a couple times to really figure it out, so you didn't learn it the first time. You learned it on that third or fourth IED strike.
Right.
And then they change it.
And then they would change it up, And like we had talked about strong pointing, Curtis and I were talking about the other day, if we would stay there another 3 months, then by the end of November, we would have a strong point on a compound, and it had been rigged to freaking blow. There had been, IEDs on the roofs or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was this constant ebb and flow of us trying to do the mission, get into contact with the enemy, but also just trying not to let that IED completely wreck your capacity as a soldier to do so.
Yeah.
And it was difficult, man.
Yeah.
Like that was the hardest part of stepping out the wire every day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm sure you saw that just rippling through your ranks.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can, you see it like when you're, if you remember sort of standing at the top of the Sperwan Ghar, like before you go out the gate, like that's in many, or you're standing out on the, whatever that slab was, like right near the DFAC.
Yeah. The hockey pad.
Yeah. The hockey pad.
Yeah.
Yes. But when you look at guys' faces, the way they're, what they're, you wonder what people are thinking and how they're like, how are you getting yourself ready for what's getting ready to happen? Did somebody just get hurt the day before? I can remember the night right after, I lost, like the first person I've ever lost is Sergeant Joel Clarkson in 2nd Ranger Battalion. We went out, like we did a raid the very next night, and I was, incredibly upset about it, and I can remember talking to my commander at the time. And, so you look at, you definitely observe, the difficulty that people are going through. And, there's a balance, there's certainly a balance between, okay, is this a situation where, this person or that person needs to maybe take a breather or go, go see somebody, versus, are they saying they're good to go and we're just going to pull them out, because in some cases guys, they want to push, they want to, push through things, but there are no perfect answers, and that in some cases is the, it's the difficult. We want there to be predictability. We want everybody to be safe. And you can look back and say, boy, we shouldn't have done X, Y, and Z, but
and I think, it's you talk about going back out that next day, and that's a consistent theme across every infantry deployment or combat deployment. And but one of the things that I kind of think about is like, sometimes that's the right answer because it gets people back on task, and it gets them back on focus, but then sometimes
sure
it wasn't the right answer,
right.
And I think one of the things about the IED threat was that, okay, if we went out, let's say we go to Sketch and there's no IEDs, somebody gets shot, and we come back, and the next day we go back to Sketcha. Now, I don't think there's an infantryman out there that would be like, I don't want to go, if they could walk in there and know they could fuck up the guys who fucked up their buddy, So if we could exacted revenge without having to worry about stepping IEDs on, on somebody or a place or whatever, then it would have been, going back out that next night would have been a different component. But for us, like by the end of the deployment, especially when we took those IED strikes, like there was nothing you could do about it. You didn't have any agency to at least present to yourself the illusion of control over it,
Yeah.
So that it made for, that's a difficult thing for soldiers to have to fight with,
Yeah.
And that's what it is at its core. It's you can't control it.
Right.
You can mitigate by route selection or training with the mine hound as well as that was, or making sure you had enough batteries
or
for
line
the mine
charges
hounds
or whatever,
line charges or whatnot. But at the end of the day, I mean, how many times Sergeant Frost, he was halfway back in his formation, stepped off the cleared path. Todd, you and Dennison and Kohler and NeGurn had already been through that intersection. You walked, and he just took one different step.
That's right.
So that knowing that in the back of everybody's heads, because in the beginning we're like, oh, well, there's all those people up there, I'm good back here. But as soon as that illusion got taken away, like that was heavy.
I was on the one with Frost. I was on the one with Jay. I'm in it, and I mean, so it's like, this you just never, you never know.
It was I mean, and they changed it up enough. There's enough variety in their implementation, the way they designed them, stuff like that, that it was a constant battle for us. So like we had, it was almost like for the infantrymen in that AO, you really had two fights going on. You had like the ground fight, the contact, the firefights, the duking it out back and forth, and then you had the IED fight simultaneously. And it was like the way that we had to tackle that in our minds was almost like two separate
right.
What's the word I'm looking for here? Not personas, but like just two separate tactics essentially that you had to build into how you approached the day to day. So that was an interesting dimension to Panjwai and the other areas down in that part of Afghanistan.
And the IEDs took away a good portion of your job. You can't send us to flank a village. You can't. Very rare situations could you set up like a support by fire or run battle drill on Alpha or whatnot. I mean, go walk in a file that's a football field long, and 5 people are in a position to return fire, and everyone else is just chilling.
That's right.
That's
right. And it's incredibly frustrating, especially when you know where you might be able to get into a position of advantage, but to do that would put folks at too much risk. And in some cases, if you can see some areas where like if it's an open field, and it would be highly and that's why I preferred to take if you could take a small element of some sort And if you can go to an area that it would be highly unlikely that if I'm Mr. IED implanter, it would be highly unlikely for me to put one right here. Like in some cases, you can take additional risk to get into a position to protect another part of the force. But again, sometimes they do put stuff in the, especially if they're good enough, which some of them are, if they're good enough to look at a piece of terrain and say, okay, well, if we hit them here, it's natural that they would kind of move into this area, into this open area or down this path, which I think in some cases they were very good at.
We ran into that problem on, I want to say it was Halloween Day. It was Halloween or Thanksgiving. Because everybody's like, happy Thanksgiving or something. I think it was Thanksgiving. Anyways, we got into a firefight. And that is exactly what happened. They and it was right outside it was in Sperwan, I think.
You're talking about the IED and
the IED and the open field.
Oh yeah, the ring of rocks.
Yeah,
there was I was convinced it was for a medevac bird.
Yeah,
they were hoping to catch somebody with a gunfire, and it was an open field. It wasn't plowed.
Yeah,
and the whole thing, there was a ring of rocks around the whole field. It was just
they pulled
obvious.
There's kind of the village opened up. It was the perfect size land of Black Hawk.
Yeah.
They hit us a couple times and kind of pulled us into that field. We pushed across that field onto that wall. I don't think I got to shoot the goose that day. I don't think I did. I tried to get it. I tried to get it in operation, but I couldn't really justify it. And then EOD got to sweeping around and found an IED in the middle. They found an IED, I think.
I don't remember if they did or not. I just remember seeing the rock formation and knowing.
It was sketchy. It was really sketchy, So they were playing with that tactic. Trying to figure out how to use it on us.
Yeah. So you actually, this isn't actually your first podcast experience. You joined John on the Spear and talked about what was probably our first major operation of the point, which was clearing the Horn of Panjwai, which a lot of our listeners from previous deployments and stuff, they're probably shuddering at the thought of doing that, or laughing at the ridiculousness of thinking that we could actually clear it. But that was a pretty significant for, especially for 3rd Platoon. It was when we took our first, KIA for deployment, Sean Brazis. And that kind of kicked off a very quick sequence of that deployment getting very real.
That's right.
That period of time between the Horn and beginning of July, Luxmore on June 10th, the engineers on the 12th. That period of time, what was kind of going through your head? Did you think it was going to continue ramping up? Did you think if we don't slow down, we're not going to have a company by
because we all thought
September?
We all thought fuck, dude, we're losing the guy weeks. By the end of this thing, half of us are gonna be wounded or killed.
In terms of what I thought was going to happen to the formation, I did not think that it was going to be catastrophic for the team, but I did know that it was going to ramp up in terms of violence. I mean, it's May in Panjwai, so this is not something that was going to slow down in terms of operational tempo. Now, if you remember, this was still, 3rd Platoon was still like, we haven't taken any contact. I mean, going into that operation, and again, you do what you're supposed to do, and don't worry about trying to get into a fight, because it's just something you don't want to invite, things like that. And that battle, that first one in particular, I think it was a huge eye opener for that platoon, and I think they did very, very well amidst the confusion of the ANA, and it was ANA. It was some police. I mean, it was very, it was very, very confusing. How that element was fighting, because it's very difficult to control what they're doing as a local security force. Now, when Luxmore was killed, I was actually at, this was one of the bigger rock drills, rehearsal of concept drills for the ANA at Zangabad. And so I was at Zangabad in the middle of this rock drill.
Yeah.
And I can remember trying to leave the rock drill. Like I was just going to leave and come, and Colonel Rutherford stopped me and he said, like, what do you think you're going to do? Like what do you think it is that you're going to do if you leave here? And in my mind, I was just like, in my mind, I was just like, I don't know. I just want to be with my company, and he said, you got to realize, like, you can't solve, everything by just going and being there. We're going to continue to these operations, like, and we're like in the middle of planning this big. So that was very difficult.
Yeah.
It was very difficult because, as I want to be on the ground. I want to be with the guy. I mean, I want to be there. So that was very hard. But, overall, I truly believe that the violence was going to get worse.
Yeah.
Which it did, which it did. And it was, but, to that point, and it may not have seemed like it, but I was trying to be very deliberate about each thing that we did, looking at each thing, certainly as they're coming together, but to say, okay, do I think we need to do this?
Right.
And then listening to the platoon leaders, platoon sergeants, like the feedback, like as you're going out on patrol, those guys are coming back to me and saying, hey, I think this is kind of what we saw. And we think it kind of links into this village, or ANA, Captain Habibullah was a guy who knew the community. I can't remember if you guys remember, there was a guy who replaced him at one point.
Yeah, they ripped out.
Yeah, and this was a guy. I don't know if you guys ever knew this, but this guy, this commander was like, on Monday we go north, on Tuesday we go east, on Wednesday. I mean, this was, and I was like, hang on a second, time out. Maybe we should, he's trying to be his coach. Maybe we should design our operations based on the enemy situation, right. And he was very, and so, there was that challenge. And if we didn't do it that way, sometimes he'd be like, I'm not going to go out.
Yeah.
Or you guys can take the lead because I don't want to do that. So yeah, that's another piece of the challenge too. So yeah.
I was with you when the engineers got hit. We were in the Grape Hut. And half of our squad was over. Luke was over there with them providing security because they were interrogating that IED.
Yeah. We were linking up with them to pull them back into the patrol base. So,
and what was happening in that Grape Hut was confusion, because we knew that they were investigating an IED.
Yeah.
And I think that was the first time I ever saw on the deployment where you didn't know what was going on, or that we saw that you didn't know what was going on, because you look around.
Yeah.
Was that a bit?
Yeah.
And then there was that infamous silence.
Yeah.
When something just happened, because if it was a BIP, you would have heard about it.
Sure.
Or they would have come back on there and like, yep, roger that. Sorry, forgot to make the 30-second call or something.
Yeah.
So there was that silence, and then you're kind of trying to process, and then you have basically three groups of people all hoping it wasn't one of theirs. We're obviously in there saying like, oh my God, like that's my squad. Like, are they okay? And you had the Afghans that were there, calling their guys like, hey, was it one of our guys? Was it one of our guys? But the most devastating one was the squad leader for that engineer element, who was by himself with us, and those were his guys.
Yeah.
And he was the only one in that room that wasn't wondering whether it was his guys.
Yeah.
He knew.
Yeah.
I remember coming back from that, pushing into the Grape Hut, and he was there. And I remember him basically just trying to figure out what the hell happened. He was asking us what was going on. I wish I could remember more detail, but I was pretty addled, obviously.
Yeah.
But it was, that speaks to the IED.
Yeah.
that
does.
speaks to how that thing fucking works.
Yeah.
Well, these elements that we received for these bigger operations, and the dog handlers, which we had for the duration, which by nature of their job were the greatest at risk in our formation.
Absolutely.
Your relationships with those teams, like the commanders of the engineers or the guy in charge of the military working dog kennels, and when they send guys down to us in these high risk roles, and we're sending them back on medevacs or in body bags. What was your relationship like with those units that were supporting us to try to give them the trust, like, hey, we're not being reckless with your guys' lives, but also please send more.
Primarily they would be over the phone because a lot of those leaders, and certainly they probably had people spread all over the place, but it was not simple to like come to Sperwan Ghar just to like check on your guys. Right. I mean, you saw the way that General Abrams had to come in. I mean, those aircraft were getting shot at trying to come and land and bring supplies and things like that. So it wasn't like, hey, I just want to quickly go check on my guys at Sperwan Ghar. There wasn't a thing. So it would be phone calls. It would be, if you send us a dog handler, they need to be able to walk. Well, what do you mean? Well, it's going to be very challenging, and they need to be in shape. Same thing if and they need to be prepared to be here for a while if we can't get them out. But let me tell you about Sergeant Lilly, because I'm the one who stumbled on him when he was going to join our operation, and I can't remember if it was at Zangabad or somewhere else, but I saw this guy standing outside of a tent, and he was standing there and he had a bandage over his neck. And, I said, hey, what's going on, Sergeant? How's it going? He's like, hey, what's going on, Sergeant? He's out there smoking a cigarette. And, I said, what's going on? I said, I just came back off some operation. And I was like, what happened to your neck? He was like, I got shot through the neck. I was like, what? I was like, damn, man. Yeah. He's standing there smoking a cigarette. And I can remember saying, yeah, man, that, I hope you're okay. We're getting ready to go out on this operation. I'm kind of looking for, people that are going to be attached. He's like, well, what company are you? BCO 164. Oh, I'm your guy. I'm like, I can remember saying, no, you're not. You're not the guy, neck, man. Yeah. You're not the guy. I can remember, calling my chain of command, being, this is probably not what we want to do. But he wanted to.
Yeah.
He wanted to do this. And for the folks who are listening, I can remember the division commander at the time, when we did the memorial ceremony for Sergeant Lilly, is, said, where do we find these men? Where do we find them? And the truth is, they're all around us every single day. And you watch what people will do. And I've said this before, that is what is, to me, the most addictive, is to, not in a bad way, in a good way, is to watch what someone will do to save the life of a friend. That is, and I believe that to my core, when you see that, so Sergeant Lilly, if you remember, these guys they were finding all sorts of stuff all the time. And so the lives that they saved,
if we had cleared on that mission,
sure,
getting fucked up.
4 or 5 guys get fucked up for sure. They at least saved the legs of 4 or 5 guys, if not 4 or 5 guys' lives. Yeah.
And so it's just incredible. So yeah, pretty amazing group of, enablers that would come, and the EOD guys, amazing, capabilities that, they brought. So I think people knew that there's a company in Sperwan Ghar who's who's really, trying to make a difference, as hard as that is. And they wanted to try to be a part of, creating some space and dismantling the capabilities that were being fed, not just in the Kandahar, but elsewhere further west into the Horn. And so, again, I mean, it's like, what does winning mean? Like, God, I'm not sure that anybody knows that, but.
And we've talked about that. Me and Curtis and I have recorded kind of a standalone episode where we basically have that conversation. And what makes military service, but especially in those situations, in those places, especially at that time, that was, I always fall back on, that was 11 years into the war.
Yeah.
It wasn't 2002 and we were there to extract revenge for 9/11, and it was, it's remarkable to think that the guys, and they fell back on just that.
But they're doing it for each other.
Yeah, and that's just it.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's an incredible. It's something I'm learning to develop a deeper gratitude for. Yeah, especially in the process of making this podcast.
Yeah,
is that it was an incredible ask of them.
Yeah,
it was an incredible ask, even though they volunteered for the job, knowing the implications of that.
Yeah.
It was still an incredible ask for these people, for a 19, 20, 21-year-old
Yeah.
kid to go out there and do this. And then when the shit went down, it was incredible to see that the willingness to go to those lengths and to those measures for other guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I get the comment, or not the comment, but the question a lot. Like, what was it worth it? What did you accomplish over there? The Taliban is still there. Sperwan Ghar got taken over about a month and a half ago.
Yeah.
It's Taliban based now.
Sure.
And what we kind of came to was, it wasn't our job to worry about that.
Yeah.
Our job was to go out, do what we were told, and get back.
Yeah.
So for us to judge the success or the merits of that deployment based on what happened 9 years later, that's pointless.
Yeah.
There's no sense in that. Even at the time, the Taliban are still here. When we leave, they're going to take Sperwan Ghar. We knew that. All along that was going to happen. But our job at that time in that place was to go out and make sure as many people got back as possible.
Yeah.
And as far as that concerned, like, if the whole country went to the Taliban, I wouldn't think it was a waste, because Luke got back, and all these other, you came back, I came back. As many people as we could get back, they came back. And in that case, it was worth it.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes it can be a tough pill to swallow, but I think you hit it, you hit it on the head, and is that, there are a lot of efforts going into what's happening in Afghanistan, and an infantry company in a small piece of a district in a province in Afghanistan. This country, I mean, you can't try to take all of that onto your shoulders. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that the Taliban is going to be involved probably in the governing of this. I mean, they technically, and practically have been this entire time. So, to feel guilty in any way. I mean, again, we did what we were asked to do to the best of our ability with I think as much care as as we could put forward, while still doing what we were asked to do. And it's tough business.
Yeah, it is. And what makes that business easier is when you get an 84 millimeter recoilless rifle, Carl Gustaf.
All right, we're gonna get the story from the horse. How did we end up with the Gustaf?
Yes,
because at that time, infantry companies did not have.
Yeah, it was like Ranger Bat and SF were the only people.
I don't remember exactly, but I think it was going to get fielded anyway,
right?
And I can't remember the timing of it, but I will say that at least at the higher levels, we were. I'm not saying at the higher levels beyond us, we were always trying to get any capability we could that would give us an edge. And I knew that from obviously from time in the Range Regiment that the Gustaf's it's a great weapon system. But I actually think, the 203 round was really employed well by the 20, the guys with the 203s to a point where, I mean, the accuracy was very impressive. It was incredibly impressive.
We got shit hot with the 203s.
Yeah. And so, having that, and then the support of Kiowa pilots and Apache pilots. I mean, these were, I bet they would probably get in trouble for some of the stuff that they did in support of the guys, like, landing and like, like we're filling up, empty care package boxes with 203 rounds, and they're, Gatorade or water, and they're like batteries, and they're like flying over at low levels, throwing it out. I mean, because guys are pinned down in the middle of a firefight. I mean, these are and they're like trying to take off, like one arm on the 203 rounds. Like, man, it's just, these are the kinds of things that,
and talking to those guys, that is the thing they're most proud of. Like they're proud of all the dudes that they smoked, and they smoked a lot of them. But they're like, I think one of the most rewarding things is when I dropped stuff out of my helicopter to guys, because they knew how much we appriopated that. They could see it.
Yeah. It's and it's a strange, it's a strange sight too. Like when third platoon was kind of in that, and they were dropping water, and like some of them are exploding, and it's like it's just this so weird. So that's pretty. That kind of stuff's impressive.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially they didn't know us. They weren't sharing. They weren't sharing a bunk with us. They weren't buddies with us.
Yeah.
They didn't have to expose themselves to that risk, but they chose to.
And I think that's when we get on my soapbox here about Army aviation. I think that's what makes Army aviation better at supporting the ground force than all the other branches, because all those guys in those cockpits, with the very rare exceptions, they're former enlisted.
Yeah.
Most of them are especially Kiowas and Apaches, they're almost overwhelmingly former combat arms. So they were there at one point.
Yeah.
They know how much it sucks.
Yeah.
And they have that hindsight, and they have that wisdom of 6-8 years as an enlisted guy,
right
at the peak of the war on terror for the guys that we had. So they knew what it meant to get a can of Copenhagen in the middle of this 5-day operation out from a guy, from a warrant officer in a helicopter. And that's what I think makes Army aviation special.
I agree.
I'm off.
I agree. I think the closest one out of the Air Force is the A-10. I mean, there was a period of time where they kind of pulled them out of the country, but
then they took them back.
A-10, that community is pretty special. It's pretty special in terms of ground support.
Fun fact for our listeners: do you know that the United States Army came this close to getting the A-10?
I didn't know that.
If you go to Cairns Army Airfield at Fort Rucker, they even went so far as to build parking spots for them. So they have like these, jets have like little cul-de-sacs, so they can pull in, they can turn around, and they can face out. They built all the cul-de-sacs for the A-10.
That's interesting.
And but once it got to a certain point, the Army or the Air Force realized what they were giving up. By getting rid of it, and they snatched it back at the last minute.
And another thing about the aviation assets, and a lot of the assets that we had access to, for one, even then we understood that we had access to so much more than, like, about the Rangerback guys having access to all that stuff. But even the stuff we had access to, we felt really fortunate to have it, because if the guys up in Korengal had to wait 45 minutes for an Apache to show up or whatever. For us, it took 5 if they were close by. But it's interesting to talk about that experience. And Army aviation in 2012 was very, very experienced with combat. More experienced than those on multiple levels, on the ground, in the air. And if you're like a Navy pilot 6,000 feet up in the air with a 2,000-pound bomb, and they're in that tree line, you can't visualize that. So that's a good point to make.
Well, even on a micro level, the difference in situational awareness of a Kiowa versus an Apache. And I loved the Kiowas. My stepdad flew them. Like, some of my best friends were Kiowa pilots. I flew Apaches. I'll remind my audience again.
Not sure.
What was that again?
What's the nomenclature?
Age 64. But the better situation was that they had flying 50 feet off the ground. Like, they saw the guys.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's the Taliban there. They're
Yeah.
right there. Let's drop a smoke grenade.
Yeah.
Whereas in the Apache, we're sitting up there, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
playing video games
Yeah.
almost. So it's a different experience. But yeah.
So,
Well, we're on track to wrapping this one up. But there's a couple things we wanted
Sure.
to ask you. What moments and memories have stuck with you from that deployment?
I think being able to take a photo kind of at the top of that, and I know that was a little bit. I think I was a little bit nervous about that one, but
Yeah.
I think we all kind of wanted to make a statement like we're not going to be, we're not going to be told, where we can go. I mean, that was a very difficult. It was very difficult deployment. I can remember doing that together. The watching guys get some awards. I think we did sort of a larger, awards thing there. Sort of down. I can't even remember. Maybe it was by the airfield, not airfield, but the HLZ.
Yeah.
But other memories are the sort of some of these discrete incidents of what guys are doing for each other in battle, whether that's like, trying to grab somebody out of a creek or, exposing themselves to take pressure off of another element, or the laughter in the midst of difficult situations. Those are the kinds of things that keep me, like, if we didn't have the people, like if we didn't have the types of people, I'm not sure that I would stay in the Army, because it's actually, like, as an officer, like, you could choose any number of professions that's not as hard as this. And like a lieutenant colonel is kind of like not a big deal in the Army. Like, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, like, you could be a lieutenant colonel, and I'm not, I want to be clear, like every branch is super important to the Army. But in terms of, like, if you think about like what you're asked to do, like, physically over the life of out of a career, like, you kind of do something else and not necessarily destroy yourself. But the kinds of folks that you get exposed to from all walks of life, and then to see how these individuals, predominantly, in the infantry, at least when we were in, was all guys, to see what guys will do for each other in battle. I mean, those are the memories that stick with me. Doc Rudy, the way he was trying to care for Sean in the midst of, like, this dog, his dog, trying to attack everybody. You guys becoming like masters of getting over these walls and selecting routes. And I mean, you had 2 PLs over the line. I mean, you look at who was left in terms of who leadership wise remained, and there weren't, most folks. Yeah.
Vincent Kohler.
Yeah.
Even Kohler came on 3
Yeah.
weeks in.
Kohler. And he wasn't there the whole time.
Yeah.
Even at the platoon level, like we've mentioned it before, Luke and I were the only
Only
people
2.
from our squad that finished.
Yeah. So, I mean, it, when you have that, that level of turnover too. But yeah, I'd say overall, going back to your original question, those are the things that kind of that stick with you, is the really what we're describing is love. And no one, we often don't talk in that way, but that's really what it is when you make a decision, and it's not just once. What we're talking about is people doing this over and over and over again. You're making a decision that I may die, and I'm okay with that because I'm going to try to save his life.
Right.
That to me is the definition of love for your brother.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, the way we close these things out is we always give everybody the space to say anything they want, so if there's something that you want to air, something that you want guys to hear, something that you want to, and because a lot of the guys that were there are going to listen to this, and I think from you, I think if there's something that you really want to say, this is, have at it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, what I want to say is thank you to both Luke and Curtis for doing this, because this is, it's important, for us to, for us to talk about this, reflect on, our previous experiences. I do want to say that I did not direct the melting of any ice cream, and which, you hear these things and it's like, man, like, what would that even look? Is it like, what would that even look like? Does like somebody have to like dump the ice cream out, or like
that is exactly in my mind. You had taken the ice cream out of the DFAC, set it in the middle of HLZ.
Yeah. Did I do it on my own? Did I have like a dolly or what? Like how?
Well, no, it was part of your workout. Remember, it was on your workout board. So
so I carried like bit by bit.
Yeah. Kind of like a water jug carry, but with ice cream.
What I am curious, like who wrote, because you said it was like on some sort of white.
Yeah, because you used to write what your workout was that day.
Yeah, which that's also funny too, because I think what I was doing, and I talked with the Lieutenant Tim Boss was the XO, and I think what we were doing was we were just putting a workout on like that we had found somewhere. I'm like, yeah, man, I was doing whatever I didn't want to do because we had patrolled like 8 hours. Like I was like, oh, well, my legs are fried, so I'm going to do something else. But at any rate, there are these, I think that there are these like legends of what we did or what I did. Certainly that, I think that's been one that's hung around quite a bit.
That was Treat. That was Nathan Treat.
Yeah.
Nathan Treat wrote that.
Treat, I'm coming for you. But I think what I would say is, I do think, there are probably a number of guys who are, suffered in some way mentally. It is not lost on me that there's physical and there's wounds and there was death. But I think one of the hidden things that is happening, and that has happened, not in our formation, we haven't suffered from any suicide, but I will say that, if you feel like there's something going on mentally, to seek help, because it's not about, being weak in any way. It's about, getting better, and there are a range of free things out there. And I'll echo what Matt said. They're not all great, but there are enough things out there to where you can go seek out something that works for you. Yeah. And if you were wounded in any other way, you would go and get looked at. And like we've said before, I mean, we're just scratching the surface on what the brain is like, and so I would encourage that, and to be proud of that, and to talk about it, and to encourage others to do the same thing, because we need outstanding leaders, not just in the military, but in our communities. And it's not just the military's problem. It's the nation's problem. And certainly I think we've got some challenges going forward, but I remain hopeful that, we can continue to get better. So, again, I mean, all thanks really goes to you guys. And, I'll be, bumping around the Army probably for some time, but, feel free for anyone, Curtis and Luke have my contact information. I'm happy to talk with you guys. Come to Fort Campbell this fall and come see me. We don't have to do PT. We can go eat some ice cream or something. Whatever you guys want to do.
I would be remiss not to mention what happened on Friday. So I sent Brian the text when we were going to meet to go visit the White House, and his response was PT 0430 Washington Monument. And I turned my phone around and I showed it to Luke, and he literally just like
physically
he
repulsed.
physically reacted to that. And not only did he physically react to it and be like, "Haha, that's funny," he's like, "It fucked with him
me,
for like
man.
an hour."
Yeah. You know, it's you know,
because he hasn't got a text like that for 8 years.
yeah. Oh, man, I tell you, that upset me more than anything we've talked about today. I actually have my recurring nightmare isn't from combat; it's from shaving my face, and I'll have a dream that I'm back in the army, and 98% of these dreams were on Sperwan Ghar. And I'll be walking past and I'll be like, I'm really confused because I'm like, I did my time. Like, I don't have to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And some feral figure is like, no, man, you got like 6 more months, you know?
Yeah.
No, but how? I did, you know?
It's not possible.
Yeah. And then I'll like catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror and I'm like, fuck, I gotta shave, you know? And that's a recurring dream for
Oh
me.
man. Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule.
It's my pleasure, guys. And like I said, yesterday, I mean, this be the best thing I do all month. So,
you said all year last.
yeah, I thought about it more. I changed my mind.
Yeah,
that's probably right.
It's
too.
early.
You got a big year ahead of you.
It's January.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
But
well, thanks again. Best of luck with the rest of your fellowship, and moving on to Campbell in the fall.
All right.
for
Thanks,
sure.
guys. Appreciate it.
Cheers.